5 years had passed since the day I buried my old self. Literally. A suitcase on my back, tears streaming down my face and a shattered heart. All because the people who were supposed to be my family turned my life into a nightmare. Before that, my life seemed perfect. Ian and I lived in a small apartment in the city center. It wasn't luxurious, but it was our home. Our mornings always started with him handing me a cup of coffee in bed, a ritual he insisted on keeping even during the busiest weeks. Together we planned every detail of the wedding. Ian focused on the invitations while I spent hours poring over decorations and dresses. Our routine was calm, filled with laughter and shared dreams. I trusted him blindly. My mother, despite being my only family, was always a complicated figure. She was charming and manipulative, the kind of person who attracted attention wherever she went. Since Ian entered my life, I noticed she liked to flirt with him, but I always thought it was harmless. Ian would laugh off her jokes and seemed uncomfortable, which reassured me that nothing was amiss. How wrong I was. The betrayal came cruelly. It was an ordinary afternoon. Ian had left work early for us to go over the ceremony plans. When I arrived home, I sensed something was wrong. The lights were off, but I could hear muffled voices coming from the bedroom. My heart raced. I opened the door and saw Ian and my mother together in a scene I could never erase from my memory. They noticed me at the door and the silence was deafening. Ian scrambled to get dressed while my mother, without a hint of shame, simply smiled and said, "Lily, you're home early." As if nothing had happened. I couldn't breathe. Words failed me. I just ran out, tears already streaming down my face. Later, Ian asked to talk to me privately. I thought he would apologize, beg for forgiveness. But he dropped a bombshell. "I can't marry you, Lily. I'm in love with someone else." My heart stopped. My mind refused to process his words. But it didn't end there. Ian continued, "It's your mother. She's pregnant with my child." The words cut deeper than any knife could. First came disbelief, then anger. My mother, the woman who was supposed to protect me, betray me like that? Ian tried to justify it, saying it was something they couldn't avoid. As if that made any difference. My mother showed up at my house the next day. She was confident, as if she had done nothing wrong. She sat on my couch like she owned the place. "Lily, you have to understand. Ian and it just happened. You know how lonely I've been since your father left us." Ian gave me attention and I couldn't resist. "It wasn't an accident, Mom. You made a choice. You chose to destroy me." My voice trembled, but I kept my resolve. "I don't want to hear your excuses. You crossed every line." She tried to hug me, but I stepped back. The space between us became an abyss. For the first time, I saw her not as the strong woman I had admired, but as weak, selfish, incapable of seeing beyond her own needs. I kicked her out of my house that same day, making it clear she was no longer part of my life. That day I didn't cry. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Instead, I gathered everything that mattered most, left Ian, my mother, and that hell behind. I blocked them both, cut off contact with everyone who knew us, and disappeared. I rebuilt my life from scratch. Rebuilding my life was a slow and painful process. I started in a small town, far from anything that could remind me of the past. I rented a modest room and got a job as an assistant at a local publishing house. It was humble work, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. I spent the first months throwing myself into work. I learned to spot grammar errors, suggest text improvements, and eventually I was promoted to assistant editor. I immersed myself so deeply in the new routine that I didn't notice how emotionally distant I had become. I made few friends, but those I made were genuine. They never asked about my past and I never offered details. In my free time, I started exploring the city. I found a cozy cafe where I could spend hours reading or simply watching people. I also ventured into painting classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage. Slowly, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been smothered by pain. Loneliness was still a constant companion, but I learned to appreciate it. My small apartment became a sanctuary. I decorated it with soft colors, plants, and paintings I had created myself. It was a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. 5 years later, I was at peace. My new home was small but cozy. I worked as a book editor and had built a quiet life, free from drama. Then, on a cold autumn afternoon, the past decided to knock on my door. Literally. When I opened it, my mother was there. Dressed in worn-out clothes, her hair disheveled, and holding the hand of a small girl with Ian's eyes. I froze for a moment. She looked tired, older than I remembered, and carried an expression of desperation. Lily, please, she began, but I raised my hand to silence her. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice colder than I knew it could be. We have nowhere to go. Ian left us. But I have no one else. I need your help. He was crying, but it didn't move me. For years, I had carried the pain of her betrayal, the humiliation of being replaced by my own fiancé. I had nothing left to give her. You destroyed my life, I said, keeping my tone firm. I owe you nothing. I can't help you. Please leave. She tried to argue, but I closed the door before she could finish. I sat on the floor, leaning against the cold wood, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. As much as my heart ached for the innocent child, I knew letting my mother back into my life would mean opening the door to more pain. And that was something I couldn't allow. Sometimes cutting ties is the only way to survive.